The only guy with the courage to join us on set.
Yes, sir. How we doing?
Well, we're doing...
I overcome dysfunction every Wednesday.
You know what? Here's the thing. That doesn't bother me.
Good. Thick skin. Well done.
So you and I both said last week, Brian Kelly doesn't get the credit he deserves.
Yeah.
How much was that and how much was, well, Clemson was missing a bunch of good players?
Well, probably a little bit of both, right? So Notre Dame had an unbelievably sound game plan, and they executed it well. And also, Clemson didn't have probably their three best or three of their top four best defensive front seven players.
That's right.
So, top quarterback in college football, out. They've got a great running back. What should you do? Make the quarterback the replacement, even if he's talented, right? So Uyongalele comes out there, and he's like, everyone says, he was great. Yes, he was great. Guess who didn't beat Notre Dame? Travis Etienne. Mm-hmm. He's the known commodity. That's a great game plan. Bottle up Etienne, make the young players make plays. And while they did, great, at least you didn't have Etienne go for 200 yards. And you're like, what? Why would you let him beat you? So, again, that was a sound game plan. You got three of the top four, maybe the three best defensive front seven players for Clemson out of the game. What should you do? Run the ball. What did they do? Incredibly well. They ran the ball. Late in the game, I thought it was easier for Ian Book to throw late in the game because that pass rush had been slowed down by the run game. So I thought that the game plan for Notre Dame was excellent, and they executed it beautifully. And at the same time, they were able to do that because of the guys that weren't on the field for Clemson.
Okay, I'm going to defend Jim Harbaugh again. Now, here's my thing.
I don't know. I'm running out of that steam.
Well, maybe I'm just more loyal as a friend. Okay, Jim's quirky. I get it. But here's what makes me want to defend him. We know James Franklin's a really good coach. He's 0-3. If you start looking at some of the stuff that's happening in college football, yeah, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, still great. Okay? There's a lot of these teams that are just unraveling with COVID and the schedule, and maybe they don't have the they don't have the talent. They don't have the reserves. They don't have the depth.
The reserves. I like that.
The reserves.
I'm going to use that.
So my point is, when James Franklin, and the Big Ten's been kind of a start-stop mess a little bit with COVID, unlike the SEC, which says we're bulldozing through it. I look at it and
not
I think,
this week. I hear your premise.
I mean, how is James Franklin 0-3 and Harbaugh? It's like, now can James
listen,
not coach?
both of them have been two of the most disappointing teams in college football this season.
Could it be just a COVID Big Ten thing?
I don't know. And the reason is because it's not like we're seeing. Here's the thing that I'm most concerned about from a Michigan perspective. So if you look at week one against Minnesota and a team that I overvalued, Minnesota, which is why I said, wow, Michigan looks really good after that week one win. They ran the football effectively. I thought that their pass rush was really good. I got the sense that like their defense was going to be very good once again. And the problem is that their defense has gone back and reverted into what we saw at the end of last year, which was a team that can't get off the field on third down and gave up way too many big plays in the passing game. 4 of their last 5 games, they've given up over 300 yards. And one of Don Brown's staples as a defensive coordinator was the fact that they were a great pass defense, one of the top pass defenses in all of college football. They don't have the requisite corners to play the aggressive style of man coverage that he likes to play. It's a bracket style of coverage that he really is his go-to, where they bracket interior players and play one-on-one on the outside, and they can't do that this year because they're getting beat at the corner position. They also are not running the football. This has been a staple of Jim Harbaugh, at least his effective teams, was the ability to run the football. Indiana, folks, this is not a defensive powerhouse. Indiana held Michigan to 13 carries for 12 yards. 12 yards, right? Like, you're not going to win. So I can't just say, like, yeah, but COVID, right? Like, COVID didn't prevent Michigan from running for 12 yards. Like, a really poor, 1, game plan, 2, execution up front, 3, lack of commitment to the running game helps you run for 12 yards. Those are things that at this point now are becoming consistent with the program. If they continue to play like this, then they're going to have one of the most disappointing seasons that they've had in recent vintage at Michigan. And by the way, Penn State's in that disappointing class. You can't be 0-3 after being top 10 coming into the season. Georgia, you're disappointing too. Kirby Smart, you say you got a great defense and that's going to take you to the playoff. And yet, in the best 2 games or the toughest 2 games of the season against Alabama and Florida, your defense was completely obliterated.
Kirby Smart can recruit. To this point, I don't know if he's a great coach. He's a great recruiter.
He's a very,
There's a
very
lot
good
of, lot of great recruiters out there. A lot of guys. Ed Orgeron's a great recruiter. I don't think he's a great coach.
If you're going to listen, you brought this up with Harbaugh and Michigan. There are some flaws right now with Michigan that we haven't seen in previous years. In previous years, they go into games that they should win, and they won soundly. And then you get to the games where it's like, okay, let's see what they are against the Notre Dames of the world or Ohio States of the world. And then that's where they would fall short. And you could kind of say, well, yeah, they don't have the talent that those other programs have. Listen, they had plenty of talent to beat Michigan State and Indiana and didn't do either. And in both games, they struggled in areas where they shouldn't. So there's some issues with Michigan right now, and I think that they're deeper than just COVID.
Okay, so it's really interesting that you were a quarterback at Colorado of some acclaim. I was a very effective bubble screen quarterback at Acosta High School. Don't have any footage, but I was way ahead of I was the Spurrier. I just bubble screens. But a high school Heisman, I would have won it. Okay, so quarterbacks are better coming out of college and more ready to play. That's indisputable.
Okay.
And what's happening now is, we always about a year out, 2 years out are like, yeah, those two guys, Trevor, Justin Fields, then there's a guy from North Dakota. And all of a sudden, we see a Zach Wilson. And you're
BYU.
like, oh boy. And then we see this kid, Mac Jones at Alabama.
Yes.
Who's got a Joe Burrow feel to him. He's a guy.
Oh, that's interesting. Who brought up that comparison earlier this year? I think it was me. That's interesting, but go ahead.
So now I look at Mac Jones, and all these people who I listen to are texting me, and I ask questions. They're like, "No, he's going to be a first-round quarterback."
Why didn't you just listen to me 4 weeks ago?
First of all, a lot of times.
Why didn't you just listen to me 4 weeks ago? I don't understand this. Now my contacts are telling me. You
sound like right now?
I'm just telling you.
Ann. She says that all day, my wife. You don't listen to me. And I'm like, well, there's some skepticism due.
And you seem like an incredibly smart lady. And you're right. Colin should listen to you more.
So Mac Jones, you watch him, and I was like, okay, it's Alabama. He doesn't get touched. NFL receivers. But my peeps are like, no, he's pretty good.
Well, when you watch him, you have to evaluate his presence in the pocket, which I think Max has been very good. Does he deliver the ball on time and on target? Yes. Does he understand the different types of throws necessary to be an effective quarterback? And I think that that's the case. You see that throw on your screen right there. Beautiful touch pass. You see him drive the football into intermediate zones. You see him use the ability to use a strong arm outside the numbers at times. And then, yes, of course, he's got great players on the outside that he throws to. He really does. And he puts the ball in places where those playmakers can have success. So he's having a phenomenal year. Zach Wilson at BYU is having a phenomenal year.
He's a fun player. I saw him a couple years ago. He's a good player. He's fun.
He's a very good player. It remains to see that ball. See how he drove it all the way outside the numbers?
Throw.
It's a beautiful throw. Max playing incredibly well. I think that we have legitimately 5, maybe 6 first-round style quarterbacks right now, top 50 quarterbacks that are starting to work themselves into that mold. Now, our top 2 are pretty clearly our top 2. Yeah. I think Trey Lance is right there, but then you're going to get your Mac Jones of the world, your Zach Wilsons, and watch out for Kyle Trask at Florida as well. Trask is having an unreal season.
I know he is. I think Dan Mullen's a really good coach.
He is a very good coach.
Okay. So, it's interesting about all this stuff. As the season kind of unfolds, you have the USC game this weekend.
Yes, Arizona.
Which is the Arizona State game is, I felt so bad for Herm Edwards. They completely out-schemed him and outplayed him, and they lost. It happens in football. So let's say, I just think USC won their toughest game. USC runs the table. They do not look like on the offensive and defensive lines they can compete with the big boys, including Notre Dame. They got a huge break. Bama, Notre Dame knocked off their schedule. If USC runs the table, goes 7-0, and their big win is Arizona State, but they're undefeated, could you put them in the playoff?
Well, we haven't seen an undefeated Power 5 team be kept out of the playoff.
Yeah, but we haven't had COVID, so if it's 7 games, it's 7 games.
I totally get that, but we don't know how many games the other teams are going to get in either. I mean, look at what's happening in the SEC. Listen, so I'll start with that premise. I think that if you get an undefeated Pac-12 champion, I believe that they'll go. All right. Remember now, the college football playoff is owned by the conferences. So they're not going to sit there and say like, well, we're going to devalue one of our main stakeholders to the point where you can go undefeated in that conference and not go to the playoff.
Oregon, by the way, does have some really nice NFL players.
They do, but they're replacing their entire offensive line and their quarterback. So at this point, I would give USC the edge in the Pac-12.
All right.
In particular, after last week in their toughest game, they get outplayed and still win. I think that that's a good omen for USC. Here's my question, though. if you're the college football playoff right now, and I'm speaking to the conferences, by the way, as well, because you guys own the college football playoff, give yourselves a break and some flexibility. Why are we running towards this hard date of December 20th? I don't understand it whatsoever. Like, have some flexibility in what's going on. Every other sport in America has allowed a massive amount of flexibility and adjustment to their schedules in order to play a requisite number of games, give the players opportunities, have a champion that we can all look at and say, you know what, that is a true champion. And they've done that because they've been flexible and they've allowed for adjustment within the schedule. There's no reason whatsoever why the college football playoff, owned by the conferences, should say we're going to have a firm date and you have to be done with your conference by December 20th. Because we're going to put the rankings out, and then we have to play the semifinals on New Year's Day, and then we have to play the champion. That can all be adjusted, and I think it should be adjusted, and really for 2 or 3 reasons. One, the first and foremost is I think it would increase the ability of the playoff to actually get the 4 best teams into the playoff. Okay, because if we stretch the season out, the cream always rises to the top. So I think that we can allow for more games if we just postpone the selection Sunday of December 20th. The other part of this is that we need to allow the opportunity for these kids to actually play the contest which they're opting in to play. Right? All these kids playing college football, these young men have opted into the season at this point. So give them the requisite opportunities to help increase their stock for the next level. Think of the last 3 number 1 draft picks that we've seen in the last 3 years. They were middling NFL draft prospects at the beginning of the season and then all of a sudden made themselves into the top pick in the draft. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and then Joe Burrow. That happens all throughout college football. So let's allow these young men the opportunity to play the games that are at least on the schedule rather than just canceling them. I think that we should be looking towards some flexibility with the college football playoff. And by the way, adjusting for more teams would have been a no-brainer, but again, the rigidness of college football, the biggest problem with college football is all these conferences and stakeholders operate in silos and they only make decisions based on their own best interest rather than the best interest for the sport. Can we please get in a room and make decisions for the best interest of the sport for once? For goodness sake, get out there and do the right thing.
Okay, I'm going to ask tough questions and I want real answers. You're the AD of Michigan today.
Okay.
Do you bring back Harbaugh?
Well, I don't have to make that decision because he's under contract for 1 more year. Basically, the ball's in Harbaugh's court. He can push for an extension, which I'm probably not going to give him. And at that point, you're basically saying the writing's on the wall. I mean, I wouldn't give Jim an extension at this point, even though his contract is the shortest contract in all of college football. It's up at the end of next season. Every other major college football coach has a contract that exceeds the length of Jim Harbaugh's.
But if you don't give him an extension, it'll upset Harbaugh, who can be very temperamental, and he'll call his agent. He'll be gone.
Well, first of all, he doesn't have an agent. He negotiates his own deals. They were negotiating in February, right before COVID, and to Jim's credit, he pulled the negotiation off the table, not because he wanted more, but because he thought it was the wrong time.
He negotiates his own deal?
You expect Jim to do anything else?
Okay. Here's my second question. Notre Dame's topped out. That Clemson win's as good as it's going to get. You're not going to beat him a second time. Should Brian Kelly go to the NFL if given a chance?
Well, I mean, let him bask in the glory. They haven't even played another game.
It's Wednesday. I'm
they're
over
barely
glory.
Clearing off the field right now. I think they're still dancing around on the field, and you want Brian Kelly to go to the NFL?
Wednesday, done celebrating. Gets an NFL offer. Go or stay at Notre Dame.
I would stay at Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's a fantastic job. And I think, by the way, Brian's done an unbelievable job at Notre Dame.
Oh, we love him. No, the rest of the people are knuckleheads. I think he's great. But I'm just telling you, NFL.
I'm a college football homer. I think all of these guys would be better suited to stay in college football. You can be there forever. You go to the NFL, you start your clock, you're going to be done in 3 years. Great. Go take what job do you want him to take? There's a better question.
Okay, let's do it right now.
You just said NFL. Which job?
Okay, Goulet. Throw me the standings.
You want him to go work for one of those quote-unquote bad owners that you were just talking about before you brought me on?
Okay, no, Dallas fires Mike McCarthy. I take it in a heartbeat.
You want anybody to take the Dallas job because they've had so much success in the last 100 years.
Okay, a Chargers Justin Herbert. I'd take that job in 1 second.
I don't know if I would. Anthony Lynn has done a pretty good job there.
That's not losing 14-point leads 4 weeks in a row.
And that's a good ownership group. You couldn't even get fans in the stands in San Diego. Now you got to be the second-tiered team in L.A.
Atlanta, Matt Ryan, decent roster offensively.
I wouldn't.
Good owner, Arthur Blank.
You're going to be gone in 3 years. So Matt Ryan retires, and then you're gone. I mean, I'm just saying that the cyclical nature of the NFL, you're not going to have a long tenure. Brian Kelly can be at Notre Dame for the next 10 years. And it's not like you're going to get paid more in the NFL. You can make the same amount of money, and if you like the opportunity to...
South Bend is small. How many times can you just say to your wife, honey, want to go to Applebee's for dinner?
Gosh, you're such a...
I just say stuff to drive you nuts.
I will tell you, though, if you want any sort of long... Like, you can build a true legacy in college football. You can leave a legacy. You can have 10, 15 years of players that you're affecting in a positive manner where they can be better men and better fathers, and they can come back and they can bring their children. And at some point, they're going to build a statue of you. And guess what? The money is the same. You're going to make $5 to $6 million a year for the next 10 years.
That's the best argument you've made today.
$60 million? You want them to just be like, oh, let me walk away for $60 million because I'm going to get guaranteed 15 in Atlanta so that when Matt Ryan retires, I'm going to get fired?
No, that's a good point.
It's an excellent point. Good. Right. Good doesn't do it justice.
All right. Anybody in your family served by?
Yes, my father was a first lieutenant in the Marine Corps and fought in Vietnam. I thank him every single year. And all of you out there who have served, thank you from the bottom of my heart, all of our hearts, for what you did, what you sacrificed, the selflessness to serve this great republic. It is the most free, the most just country in the history of the world, and it is so because of what you did. Thank you so much.
You were almost likable this week. You have to work on your game. I want the old Klatt back. Good seeing you, buddy.
You too.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.